Welcome back to Real Help, and thank you for staying with us. A breakup of a long-term relationship can have a massive impact on emotional and mental health. It can also erode one's trust and self-confidence, making it very difficult to cope with life in general. So how can one go about recovering from such a traumatic incident and build up trust again? We've invited psychotherapist and relationship expert Louisa Niehaus to chat to us about this topic. Welcome, Louisa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
Great. Now, I mentioned that it's a traumatic experience to break up, and I think anyone who's gone through a breakup after a long time knows that.
Yeah.
What are the sort of emotional impacts of an event like that?
I think people mostly feel a great sense of loss.
Yeah.
There's sometimes a sense of failure. Sometimes people feel like they have lost the most significant part of their lives. They don't feel like they don't have an identity. But mostly a lot of sorrow and a lot of loss. I mean, to break up with someone or to walk away from a marriage or a long-term partnership that you've been in, and especially if it's under difficult circumstances, is hugely traumatic.
Absolutely. I mean, you've built a life with somebody over many years, and then suddenly to lose that, and all those connections and experiences, it must be huge.
That's such a valid point. Connections, experiences. Because when you're in a long-term relationship, there are lots of friends that you've shared together, extended family, hobbies that you've done together, rituals that you've done together, things like cooking meals together or going places together. All of that goes, and you're left with this almost like a vacuum. There's an empty space.
You could equate it almost to losing somebody, losing a loved one in terms of death, because suddenly this space that was so occupied in your bed, in your living room watching TV, in your car next to you driving, is gone. So is there a process of grieving that needs to be dealt with?
Yeah, it's very important to grieve and not to rush the grieving process as well. The last thing any of us want to feel is pain and hurt. So we will do everything that we can to avoid that. But it's part of our human development in terms of our healing. You've got to allow the process to happen. Mourn. Because when you mourn it properly, you will move through it better.
What are the risks of not mourning it? I mean, you see people who break up from a long-term relationship, and because they don't know how to be alone, they jump into something else that either is a rebound, as they call it, or is something that just isn't right, but for the sake of being with somebody, they might stay with it.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. A lot of people with our world of internet dating become serial daters. It's like copy and paste. I'm just going to get somebody else in to fill the space, because people are so afraid of being on their own. And when you haven't spent time on your own, you don't know who you are. So you're looking for others to fill you up. You need to know who you are independently of an other, so that you can bring richness and warmth and depth and different things to your new relationship. Have some time alone. Have some time doing stuff for you. Don't jump straight into another relationship because you can't bear the thought of being alone, or if you're jumping into another relationship to ease your pain. It's counterintuitive. Don't do that. You need to feel the pain and then move through it.
I imagine also, if you've been in a relationship for such a long time, the world around you has changed from when you were previously dating, and you've changed and grown as a person in so many ways. So you need to almost have the time to register that change and understand it a little bit more.
That's a really valid point. If you think of someone that's been in a long-term marriage or long-term partnership for 20 odd years, perhaps they haven't dated. The last time they dated was in their 20s or early 30s. All of a sudden, you're thrust into this world of dating. You're older. Other people maybe have children or have experienced a number of other relationships. The world has changed, and your mindset might still be stuck back in when you were dating in your 20s. So it's a whole new ball game. And it can be very, very vulnerable and quite daunting for people who haven't experienced this.
What are the risks around developing depression and anxiety if you don't deal with the grief, the trauma? How bad can it get?
I think it gets bad if you are not coping in terms of being able to work, being able to engage in your regular activities. for a period of 6 months or more. I think that's when you really need to start thinking whether you need to get some professional help. Although I'm a great advocate of dealing with your pain and being able to mourn, if it is ongoing and you aren't able to cope, go and see somebody. Go and see a professional, see someone like me who's a relationship expert. Just to talk it through, because there could also be other patterns at play here. It might be something, if this happens to you continually, that you're doing. You might be, because in every breakup or every relationship, there's two people that play a part in that.
Absolutely. How long, if you're going to sort of work to maintain a good relationship with a partner that you've separated from, how much time do you need to give? Is there a cooling off period that you should sort of impose, or do you start working on building a good platonic relationship immediately?
I think it would be helpful to start building a good platonic relationship from the start. Communication is really important. So if you're upfront, honest, and kind, that goes a long way to setting the tone as to how things are going to go forward.
How do you build trust after a breakup like this? So trust in other people, and then also confidence in yourself if you've gone through a traumatic breakup.
No, I'm glad you asked that, because those are two very, very big factors that come into play, and they're often known as baggage.
Which has a very negative connotation.
Yes, it is. But I've written an article on this previously, and I've said these days we have wonderful suitcases that are very lightweight. So you don't need to carry that much heavy baggage. If you have access to psychotherapy, if you have access to counseling, and if you have self-awareness.
Yes, absolutely.
If you have been hurt in terms of perhaps there was infidelity in your relationship, you're at a certain age, you're older, perhaps you haven't been on the dating scene, naturally there's going to be those two issues of trust and confidence. My strongest piece of advice to people would be, do not rush into relationships, because if you are feeling vulnerable, you're not feeling confident, you're going to re-wound yourself by putting yourself at the coalface and dating too soon when you haven't resolved your own personal issues.
That's when you take the baggage into the new relationship.
And then it escalates, because you take your baggage into that relationship, you want this relationship to work, it doesn't work, and you re-wound yourself all over again, thinking, oh, I'm never going to meet anybody, everybody's awful out there in the dating world, and it actually might be something you are bringing to the table.
So I think that self-reflection is such a big thing in so many aspects of life, because it's easy to blame, but if you haven't taken the time to register what's happening internally, you've lost a little bit.
And that's why I say to people, take the time out to get to know yourself. If you start by joining a running club or going to an art class, that's where you build up your confidence, and you also learn social skills outside of that significant partnership or marriage that you had. And you can learn to engage with people in a non-threatening way.
It's wonderful, actually. I think also another issue sometimes is comparison. If you do come into a new relationship, there's going to be this element, well, potentially, of comparing the new to the old. How do you manage that?
When we reflect back on past relationships, we often only see the rosy part. And maybe that rosy part might be a bit dated, because you're a different person right now. Post the relationship, you're older, wiser, you've had different experiences. So when you want to engage in a new relationship and compare, like aren't like, because you are very different now. So
the comparison
remind
is not
yourself, it's not relevant.
Well, Louisa, it's a fascinating topic and very interesting, and hopefully we've given the viewers something to think about.
I hope
so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much.